The vastness of space stretched endlessly beyond the reinforced transparisteel viewports of Omega-9, the most advanced diplomatic station in the known galaxy. Here, representatives from dozens of civilizations gathered regularly to discuss matters of intergalactic importance, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of cosmic evolution. The station's central chamber hummed with the soft vibration of gravity generators and atmospheric processors, maintaining optimal conditions for the myriad of species that called this neutral territory their temporary diplomatic home. Phoenix Blackwood adjusted her simple Earth Standard uniform, acutely aware of how mundane she appeared among the assembled delegates. To her left stood Ambassador Zephrix of the Crystalline Collective, his translucent body refracting the chamber's ambient light into prismatic patterns. To her right, the insectoid delegate from the hive worlds clicked and chittered in rapid succession, communicating through pheromone releases that her translation device struggled to interpret accurately. The apex predator situation continues to deteriorate across 17 star systems, announced Director Valdris, a towering Arcturian whose metallic carapace gleamed under the artificial lighting. His voice carried the weight of eons, his species having achieved spaceflight when humans were still discovering fire. These void stalkers, as your kind calls them, have attacked mining colonies, disrupted trade routes, and most recently completely decimated the agricultural dome of Kepler 442b. Phoenix had studied the files extensively during her journey from Earth. Void stalkers were apex predators that had somehow spread across multiple star systems, defying all known laws of biology and physics. They were creatures of shadow and fury, standing nearly 3 meters tall with elongated limbs that ended in razor-sharp claws. Their most distinctive feature was their ability to phase partially out of normal space-time, making them nearly impossible to track or contain. The human delegation wishes to contribute to the discussion, Phoenix said, her voice steady despite the subtle dismissive glances from several delegates. Ambassador Threx of the Greater Magellanic Coalition, a being resembling a massive cephalopod with cybernetic enhancements, undulated his tentacles in what she recognized as their species equivalent of a condescending chuckle. Young human, your species has been part of this alliance for merely 3 decades. Some of us have been dealing with these creatures since before your homeworld developed multicellular life. With respect, Ambassador Threx, Phoenix replied, maintaining her composure. Perhaps it's time for a fresh perspective. Earth may be new to this alliance, but we've coexisted with apex predators for millennia. We've learned to understand them rather than simply fear them. The crystalline delegate's form shimmered as he spoke, his voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Understanding. These void stalkers have resisted every form of communication we've attempted. They respond only to force, and even then temporarily. Director Valdris activated the central holographic display, showing grisly footage from the latest attacks. The Void Stalkers moved like liquid death, phasing through defensive barriers and striking with precision that suggested intelligence far beyond that of mere beasts. Our combined military forces have had minimal success. The Nexus War Council estimates we'll need to evacuate 12 more systems within the next solar cycle. Phoenix watched the footage intently, noting patterns that others seemed to miss. The attacks weren't random acts of violence, she realized. There was purpose, almost desperation, in their movements. May I see the environmental data from the affected systems? She asked. Environmental data, Director Reed, from Earth's delegation, looked puzzled. Phoenix, what relevance could that have? Humor me, Director Reed. The holographic display shifted, showing atmospheric compositions, electromagnetic readings, and gravitational anomalies. Phoenix studied the data, her mind racing. Something clicked into place, a connection that made her breath catch. They're not attacking us, she said, suddenly causing the chamber to fall silent. They're running from something. The silence stretched for several heartbeats before Ambassador Threx's tentacles writhed in agitation. Explain yourself, human! Look at the pattern. Every attack coincides with massive electromagnetic disturbances in nearby systems. These aren't random strikes, they're panic responses. Something is driving them toward our settlements, toward... Phoenix paused, a terrible realization dawning. Toward sources of life energy. As if summoned by her words, the station's alarm systems suddenly blazed to life. Red emergency lighting bathed the chamber as a voice boomed through the communication system. All delegates to emergency stations. Multiple unknown contacts approaching at sublight speed. Defenses are not responding. Through the viewports, they could see them streaking through space toward the station. Void stalkers, dozens of them, their dark forms barely visible against the cosmic void, except for the way starlight seemed to bend around them. The station's massive defensive turrets swiveled to track the creatures, but their energy weapons passed harmlessly through the phasing forms. "How are they in space?" gasped Director Reed. "They're biological entities." "They're more than that," Phoenix said, her voice carrying a strange note of understanding. "They're part of something bigger." The first Void Stalker materialized inside the chamber, its arrival marked by a reality-warping distortion that made the air itself seem to scream. The creature stood over 3 meters tall, its elongated form covered in what appeared to be the organic armor that shifted between solid matter and something resembling controlled shadow. Its head, if it could be called that, held clusters of sensory organs that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Panic erupted instantly. Ambassador Threk's tentacles flailed as he activated personal shielding, while the crystalline delegate's form blazed with defensive energy. Security forces rushed in from all entrances, their weapons trained on the creature. Though Phoenix noticed with growing dread that none of them opened fire, they were waiting for the creature to make the first move. The Void Stalker's sensory organs fixed on Phoenix, and she felt something she hadn't expected: recognition. Not the mindless hunger she'd seen in the footage, but intelligence. Ancient alien intelligence that carried the weight of eons. Without fully understanding why, Phoenix took a step forward. "Phoenix, no," Director Reed called out, but she ignored him. The chamber held its collective breath as she approached the creature. Its form rippled reality, bending around it as it prepared to phase again, but it didn't. Instead, it tilted its head in an unmistakably curious gesture. Phoenix had spent years studying animal behavior on Earth, working with everything from great white sharks to silverback gorillas. She recognized the body language of a confused, frightened creature when she saw it, regardless of how alien its form might be. "You're lost," she said softly, not sure if she was speaking to the creature or to herself. "You're all lost." The Void Stalker made a sound, a low harmonic that seemed to resonate in Phoenix's bones. Around the chamber, more of the creatures phased into existence, but they didn't attack. They surrounded Phoenix and the first creature, forming what could only be described as a protective circle. "Fascinating," breathed Ambassador Zephrix, his crystalline form pulsing with excited energy. They're protecting her." Phoenix extended her hand slowly, the way she might approach a frightened animal. The Void Stalker's sensory organs focused on her palm, and she felt a sudden rush of images and sensations that weren't her own. Flashes of memory, vast, dark spaces between stars, fleeing from something that burned like antimatter, seeking refuge among the warm and living worlds. "You're refugees," she whispered. "Not invaders, refugees." The creature's harmonic changed, becoming almost mournful. Through their strange connection, Phoenix felt its distress, its confusion at finding itself confined to physical space when it had once moved freely between dimensions. Whatever had driven them from their home had also damaged their ability to exist in their natural state. "Phoenix, what are you doing?" Director Reed demanded, his voice tight with fear. "I'm listening," she replied, her hand now resting on the Void Stalker's arm. The contact sent more images flooding through her mind. Planets devoured by consuming darkness, entire dimensions collapsing, the Void Stalker's desperate flight to find sanctuary. The chamber erupted in gasps as Phoenix suddenly stood and began to speak in a series of harmonics that no human throat should have been able to produce. The sounds came from somewhere deeper than consciousness, as if the Void Stalkers were teaching her their language in real time through their connection. The creatures responded immediately, their own harmonics joining hers, in what could only be described as a conversation. To the assembled delegates, it looked like Phoenix was conducting some sort of otherworldly orchestra, her movements fluid and purposeful as she communicated with beings that had terrorized the galaxy. "Incredible," muttered Ambassador Threx. "She's actually communicating with them." But Phoenix barely heard him. Through her connection with the Voidstalkers, she was seeing the truth of their situation. They weren't just refugees. They were guardians fleeing from something that threatened not just their dimension, but all dimensions. Something called the Void Hunger, a force that consumed reality itself. "They've been trying to warn us," she said aloud, her voice carrying harmonics that made the air shimmer. "The attacks on mining colonies, the disruption of trade routes, it wasn't random violence. They were trying to get our attention, trying to tell us something was coming." As if her words had triggered something, the station's long-range sensors suddenly detected new contacts. But these weren't more Voidstalkers. The readings showed something that defied classification holes in space that seemed to devour sensor data approaching from the galactic rim. The Void Hunger. Phoenix said the words, translating automatically from the Voidstalkers' language. "It's here." Director Valdris's carapace rattled with agitation. "What is this Void Hunger? What are these readings?" Phoenix turned to face the assembled delegates, her hand still maintaining contact with the Voidstalker leader. "It's what drove them from their home dimension, a force that exists in the spaces between realities, consuming everything it touches. The Voidstalkers aren't our enemies, they're our allies, whether we knew it or not." The station shuddered as something massive passed nearby space itself, seeming to ripple in its wake. Through the viewports, they could see reality distorting stars disappearing into absolute nothingness. "It's going to consume this entire system." Phoenix continued, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of what she was saying. "The Voidstalkers can fight it, but not alone. They need anchors in our reality connections that can help them focus their abilities." "What kind of connections?" asked Ambassador Zephyric. Phoenix smiled an expression that was both human and somehow more than human, touched by her contact with the interdimensional beings. "They need us. All of us. Every species, every mind that can touch theirs and help them maintain their grip on our reality." The Voidstalker leader's harmonics shifted, and Phoenix nodded, as if understanding perfectly. "They're willing to share their knowledge to teach us how to phase between dimensions, how to fight something that exists outside normal space-time. But they need our life energy, our consciousness to remain stable in our universe." Director Valdris stepped forward, his metallic form towering over Phoenix. "You're asking us to trust creatures that have killed thousands of our people. I'm asking you to trust that sometimes the difference between predator and protector depends on perspective," Phoenix replied. "They killed our people because they were trying to save them, trying to warn them about what was coming. They just didn't know how to communicate with us." The station shuddered again, more violently this time. Through their connection, Phoenix felt the Voidstalkers' urgency. The Void Hunger was almost upon them, and they were running out of time. "I need your decision now," she said, addressing all the delegates. "Will you trust them? Will you trust me?" For a moment, the chamber was silent except for the station's groaning superstructure. Then Ambassador Threx undulated forward, his tentacles reaching toward the nearest Voidstalker. "The Confederation of Magellanic States stands with Earth's representative." One by one, the other delegates approached their own hands' appendages or energy fields, making contact with the Voidstalkers. Phoenix felt the network expand, felt the combined consciousness of dozens of species linking through the interdimensional beings. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Reality seemed to solidify around them, the station's defenses suddenly blazing to life with effectiveness they had never shown before. But more than that, Phoenix could feel the Void Stalker's abilities amplifying their phase-shifting powers, becoming precise tools rather than desperate survival mechanisms. Together, she said, her voice now carrying harmonics from every species in the chamber. We fight together. The battle that followed defied every law of physics. The assembled species thought they understood. The void hunger manifested as tentacles of pure nothingness that reached out from tears in reality itself, each touch erasing matter and energy from existence. Against this stood the alliance of the living and the interdimensional organic minds, providing stability while the Void's stalkers wielded their phase abilities like reality-bending weapons. Phoenix found herself at the center of it all, her consciousness linking every mind in the network, translating thoughts and intentions across species barriers. She wasn't just communicating with the Void Stalkers anymore, she was communicating through them. Her awareness expanded across dimensions she'd never imagined existed. Through their shared consciousness, she saw the Void Stalkers' true nature. They were children of reality's boundary layers, beings who had evolved to exist in the spaces between dimensions. They weren't apex predators in any traditional sense. They were gardeners of the possible, maintaining the barriers that kept different realities from bleeding into each other destructively. The void hunger wasn't just a threat to their dimension, it was a cancer in the fabric of existence itself, consuming the boundaries between realities and leaving nothing but endless empty possibility in its wake. Working in perfect harmony, the Alliance pushed back against the incursion. The Void Stalkers phased through the Void Hunger's attacks, their consciousness anchored by their living allies, while the various species provided everything from raw computational power to emotional stability, to the strange quantum resonances that some species naturally produced. Phoenix felt herself changing during the battle, her human consciousness adapting to interface directly with interdimensional reality. She could sense the spaces between thoughts, the pauses between heartbeats, where other realities pressed against their own. It should have been terrifying, but instead it felt like coming home to a place she'd never known she'd been missing. The turning point came when Phoenix realized that the void hunger wasn't malevolent. It was simply following its nature, consuming because that was what it was designed to do. But like any force of nature, it could be redirected rather than destroyed. Working through the network, she and the Void Stalkers began to weave new boundary layers, channels that would direct the void hunger's influence away from inhabited realities and toward the empty spaces between galaxy clusters. It was like performing surgery on reality itself, requiring precision beyond anything any single species could achieve alone. When the last tendril of void hunger disappeared into the newly created channels, the silence that followed was profound. The Alliance members remained connected for several minutes, their shared consciousness slowly separating back into individual awareness. Phoenix was the last to disconnect reluctantly, letting go of the expanded perception that had let her touch the edges of infinity. When she opened her eyes, she found herself surrounded by delegates who were looking at her with a mixture of awe and something approaching reverence. "You did it?" Director Reed said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You actually did it." Phoenix shook her head, smiling, as she looked at each delegate and their Void Stalker partner. "We did it, all of us together." The Void Stalker leader approached her, its form more solid and stable than it had been before. Through their connection, Phoenix felt its gratitude, but also something else, an invitation. They're offering to share their knowledge, she translated for the others. Not just about interdimensional physics or phase-shifting technology. They want to teach us about the true nature of reality, about how consciousness itself shapes the universe. Ambassador Zephyrix's crystalline form pulsed with excitement. This could revolutionize everything we thought we knew about existence itself. More than that, Phoenix said, her hand still resting on the Void Stalker's arm. They're offering partnership. They'll help us explore and protect realities beyond our own. And in return, we'll help them maintain the barriers between dimensions. We'll become gardeners together. Director Valdris stepped forward, his metallic carapace catching the light. The Arcturian hegemony formally proposes a new classification for our former adversaries, not as apex predators, but as interdimensional guardians with full diplomatic status within the alliance. The motion was seconded by every delegate present, unanimous consent that would have been impossible before the crisis. In the weeks that followed, Omega-9 was transformed into something unprecedented, an interdimensional research station where organic and phase-shifting beings worked side by side. Phoenix found herself appointed as the first director of interdimensional relations, a position that required her to maintain permanent partial contact with the Voidstalker consciousness network. The changes in her were obvious to anyone who looked closely. She moved with the fluid grace of someone who could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and her eyes held depths that seemed to reflect infinity itself. But for all the changes, she remained fundamentally human, bringing her species natural adaptability and empathy to relationships that spanned realities. Earth's status within the Galactic Alliance underwent a dramatic transformation. Suddenly, the young human civilization found itself at the center of the most significant scientific and philosophical revolution in galactic history. Other species began sending delegations to Earth, eager to understand what made humans so uniquely suited to interdimensional contact. The answer Phoenix discovered lay in humanity's evolutionary history. Millions of years of adapting to changing environments, of forming emotional bonds with other species, of imagining realities beyond their immediate perception. All of this had prepared humans to serve as living bridges between dimensions. 6 months after the crisis, Phoenix stood in the observation deck of Omega-9, watching as Voidstalkers and various Alliance species worked together to construct a new type of spacecraft, one that could safely travel between realities. Director Reed approached carrying a communication pad. "Status report from the Andromeda Exploration Team," he said, handing her the device. The Voidstalkers were right. There's an entire network of inhabited dimensions accessible from there, and they're all eager to join the expanded alliance. Phoenix smiled, reading through the report. Each new dimension discovered brought new perspectives, new ways of understanding existence itself. The galaxy was no longer the limit of their ambition. It was merely the starting point. "Any word from the Void Hunger monitoring stations?" she asked. "All systems quiet. The new boundary channels are holding perfectly. The Voidstalkers predict they'll remain stable for several million years, assuming we maintain the consciousness network they've taught us to build." Phoenix nodded, her attention drawn to a slight distortion in space near the station. A moment later, a new Voidstalker materialized, its harmonics carrying news from distant dimensions. Through their network connection, she felt its message, a request for assistance from a reality threatened by temporal disruptions. "Looks like we have another mission," she said, already feeling the network activating around her. Director Reed raised an eyebrow. "Another interdimensional crisis." "Not a crisis." Phoenix corrected, her consciousness beginning to expand into the Voidstalker network. "An opportunity. Every reality we help stabilize makes the entire interdimensional ecosystem stronger. Every species we bring into the network adds new perspectives, new ways of thinking about existence itself." As she spoke, her perception shifted, awareness flowing through dimensions like water through connecting vessels. She could feel the thoughts of Voidstalkers spread across multiple realities, the consciousness of Alliance species from thousands of worlds, all linked in a vast network of shared understanding. What had started as a diplomatic crisis had evolved into something unprecedented. The first truly interdimensional civilization, bound not by conquest or trade, but by the shared goal of maintaining and protecting the infinite tapestry of reality itself. Phoenix Blackwood, once just another human diplomat, had become something new. A bridge between worlds, a translator of impossible thoughts, a gardener of realities yet to be explored. And as she prepared for her next journey into the spaces between spaces, she reflected on how wrong those early estimates had been. They had thought she was just a girl from a young species with little to offer the galactic community. They hadn't understood that being young meant being adaptable, that being human meant being capable of forming bonds that transcended species, dimension, and reality itself. The Voidstalkers' apex predators of interdimensional space hadn't been tamed or controlled. Instead, they had found in humanity the partners they needed to fulfill their true purpose as guardians of existence. And humanity had found in them a path to something greater than they had ever imagined possible. As Phoenix felt her consciousness merge with the network, once again preparing to step between dimensions to render aid to another threatened reality, she smiled. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but the spaces between universes were infinite and full of friends she hadn't met yet. In the end, it hadn't been about dominating apex predators or proving human worth to the galaxy. It had been about recognizing that the greatest predators were often the greatest protectors, and that understanding could bridge any gap, even those between realities. The alliance between dimensions grew stronger with each passing day, each species contributing something unique to the whole. Humans brought empathy and adaptability. Voidstalkers provided interdimensional expertise. The Crystalline Collective offered pure computational power. The Arcturians gave structure and organization, and dozens of other species added their own irreplaceable contributions. Phoenix Blackwood had thought she was attending a simple diplomatic conference. Instead, she had helped birth the first interdimensional civilization, proved that humanity deserved its place among the stars, and discovered that the universe was just the first chapter in a story that spanned infinite realities. And as the alliance continued to grow, reaching out to help troubled dimensions and welcome new species into their ever-expanding network, one truth became clear. The greatest adventures were just beginning.